The sky over Burma in early 1942 carried the dull color of old bruises, a heavy gray that hinted at both rain and something far more dangerous. The monsoon winds were beginning their slow arrival from the Bay of Bengal, thick with the smell of wet earth, smoke, and jungle rot. The Allied forces scattered around the battered Loiwing airstrip were exhausted and running out of time. Japan's push across Southeast Asia was relentless, swallowing towns, rail lines, bases, and entire divisions. Day after day, Japanese aircraft flooded the skies in overwhelming numbers, hammering every position the Allies tried to hold. The roar of their engines never seemed to fade, it merely waited for dawn to return. Among the men stationed there was Lieutenant Jack McAllister, a tall but wiry American pilot with sandy hair, a steady expression, and a reputation for composure under fire. He was one of the last active pilots of the American volunteer group, the legendary Flying Tigers. Weeks of brutal combat had depleted his squadron until he was one of only a handful still flying, and each day he pushed himself beyond exhaustion. His aircraft, a Curtiss P-40B Warhawk painted with the famous shark mouth, looked almost as tired as he did. Bullet patches covered the fuselage, the engine coughed when cold, and the landing gear creaked every time it moved. Yet despite its wounds, the aircraft still flew, and in 1942 Burma, that alone was a miracle. Jack's closest companion was Sergeant Ming Zhao, a Chinese mechanic who treated airplanes like living spirits. He worked on the battered P-40 almost without sleep, patching holes, tightening panels, and praying aloud in Mandarin while he did it. "She's stubborn like you," he often joked, patting the Warhawk's side. Jack always pretended not to believe in such superstitions, but deep down he felt the plane responded to Ming's hands. Their commanding officer, Colonel Harold Vance, a former RAF man whose uniform hung loosely on his exhausted frame, tried to keep morale alive in the face of collapse. He had been watching his men starve, retreat, and fall one by one, and every new dawn was another reminder that the front could not hold much longer. Supplies were low, ammo was scarce, and most of the surviving aircraft had already been evacuated north. By the time the sun began to rise on the day everything changed. Only 2 P-40s remained operational. And by dawn, only one, Jack's, was capable of taking off. He had barely managed 3 hours of restless sleep on a sagging cot in a leaking tent when the drone of engines reached the camp. At first it sounded like distant thunder, a rolling vibration that trembled through the mud beneath their boots. But it grew louder, so loud that corrugated metal sheets rattled and cups jumped on tables. Jack jerked awake, heart pounding even before he understood the sound. Colonel Vance burst from the command tent, face pale. "McAllister! Scramble! They're coming in from the east, dozens of them!" Jack didn't even answer. He sprinted toward the aircraft, still buckling his flight harness. Ming Zhao was already there tightening the last bolts. His face was pale too, and his voice cracked when he spoke. "They are many, Jack. Maybe 60. His hands shook. Jack froze for a heartbeat. He had expected a strike, maybe 20 planes, even 30, but 60 or more meant the Japanese intended to erase the airfield entirely. Ming grabbed his sleeve, looking into his eyes as though he were looking at a brother. "Jack, this plane, she is not ready for long fight. She just needs to get me up there," Jack said. Ming took a breath. "Get you up there, and keep you alive!" Jack didn't reply. He climbed into the cockpit, slammed the canopy shut, and hit the starter. The P-40 coughed like an old smoker, sputtered twice, then roared awake with a guttural growl. Smoke belched from the exhaust. He taxied onto the muddy strip, engine rattling, wings quivering. Then he saw them, tiny black dots moving across the far horizon. He counted quickly. 54. 58. 63. 64. 64 Japanese aircraft, and 1 P-40. The Japanese formation was enormous. A first wave of Ki-43, Oscar, fighters, a second wave of Ki-21 bombers behind them, with escorts sweeping wide on both sides. A vanguard dove load to prepare strafing runs. It was a formation designed to crush everything beneath it in a single coordinated stroke. Colonel Vance's voice cracked through the radio. "Jack! Don't take them head-on. Break away, scatter them, just don't die up there." Jack pushed the throttle all the way forward. The P-40 lurched into motion, rattling down the muddy strips so fast the tail hardly rose before he pulled the aircraft into the air. Machine gun fire erupted from the first wave of Oscars the moment they spotted him. Tracers streaked by like fiery raindrops. He climbed hard, pulling into a steep ascent that made his stomach twist and darkened the edges of his vision. Behind him, the sky bloomed with enemy aircraft. 64 against 1. He could not outfight them. He could not outrun them. But maybe, just maybe, he could outthink them. Jack had once learned a trick, a dangerous one, from an eccentric former stunt pilot back in the United States. It was not in any manual. No official instructor would approve it. But in a sky this crowded, with so many planes in tight formation, it might be the only thing that could keep him alive for more than 30 seconds. He leveled out at 9,000 feet, letting the Japanese fighters line up behind him. Then, with a deep breath, he did the unthinkable. He cut the throttle. All the way back. The P-40 bucked like it had hit a brick wall. Airspeed dropped. The engine choked. But the Japanese fighters, still accelerating into their attack run, shot past him in a blur, overshooting him before they even realized their mistake. Jack rammed the throttle forward again, and the P-40 surged ahead, slipping right beneath the bellies of the enemy fighters. Now he was behind them. He fired one precise burst. The .50 caliber guns ripped into the belly of an Oscar, and the fighter erupted in flame. But Jack did not stay to admire the kill. He dove sharply, dragging 3 Japanese fighters with him. He skimmed the treetops, branches whipping past so close they scraped the underside of his wings. The enemy pilots, too close and too fast, clipped trees. One crashed instantly, another spiraled away with smoke trailing from its tail. On the ground, Allied soldiers stared upward in awe. They had never seen anything like it. Colonel Vance whispered, "Good God, he's turning them against themselves." The sky became a shifting, chaotic maze of aircraft. Jack dove, twisted, climbed, rolled, anything to stay unpredictable. His P-40 was fast in a dive but slow on the climb, so he used gravity as his closest ally. Each time he dove, Japanese fighters followed, and each time they risked colliding with one another or overshooting into the line of bombers. Within minutes, 2 Oscars collided trying to avoid him. A bomber clipped a wingman. Another fighter misjudged a turn and spiraled into the jungle below. Jack was not defeating 64 planes with firepower. He was using their own numbers against them. But the strain on his body was brutal. Sweat poured into his eyes. His arms ached from wrenching the stick. His breathing became labored, every turn sending pain through his chest. Still, he flew. 40 Japanese planes became 30. 30 became 25. His ammunition was nearly gone. His fuel gauge was dropping fast. Captain Hiroshi Takeda, the Japanese commander, finally recognized the problem. The lone P-40 was not escaping, it was creating chaos. "Break formation!" he barked. "Surround him!" The remaining fighters spread out, forming a tightening circle around Jack. They forced him upward, into thinner air where his damaged engine struggled. If he went much higher, he would stall and die. If he descended, they would pounce. Then he saw the bombers closing in for their final run on the airfield. If they succeeded, the camp, and every man in it, would be wiped out. Jack made his decision. He pulled the P-40 into a steep climb, straight toward the heart of the bomber formation. Japanese fighters opened fire, bullets stitching across his wings. Panels ripped loose, fuel lines erupted into smoke, and the engine screamed in protest. Still he climbed. At the last possible second before crashing into the bombers, he flipped the aircraft upside down and dove right through their formation. One panicked bomber swerved left. Another veered right. A fighter diving after Jack clipped a bomber's tail. 2 bombers collided mid-air, exploding into a fiery blossom. Another broke formation and slammed into an escort trying to avoid debris. Chaos spread through the tight bomber group like lightning through dry wood. From the ground, Allied soldiers watched the sky erupt into fireballs. Burning aircraft tumbled downward, black smoke curling behind them. What had been 64 planes moments ago was now less than 10. The survivors broke and fled east. Jack's P-40, however, was barely holding together. Smoke streamed from the engine. The propeller spun unevenly. The canopy was cracked. Jack could barely keep his eyes open. "Come on, just a little more. I'm going home." He managed to reach the airfield, but the landing gear was gone, blown away somewhere in the chaos. He brought the P-40 down belly first. It struck the ground hard, bounced, skidded across mud, smashed into wooden crates, and spun violently before the nose dug into a ditch. Jack's head snapped forward, and everything went black. When he opened his eyes, he was being dragged away from the burning wreckage by Ming Zhao and 2 soldiers. Ming wept openly. "You're alive! Jack, you crazy fool, you're alive!" Jack coughed, tasting smoke. Did they leave?" Colonel Vance knelt beside him, staring up at the black trails of smoke twisting through the sky. "Jack, you didn't just make them leave." He swallowed, voice thick with disbelief. "You stopped an entire air sweep with 1 plane." Word of Jack's impossible stand spread across Burma, then China, then the Pacific. Pilots studied his improvisation for years. Strategists analyzed how a lone aircraft had turned a massive formation against itself. The battered Loy-Wing airfield survived long enough for reinforcements to arrive, and morale soared among the exhausted ground troops. And the legend of the young American pilot who faced 64 enemy planes alone left every man who witnessed it with a single sentence etched into memory. When 64 planes attacked, Jack didn't fight them. He made them fight each other.